Joining us now, the director and executive producer of the excellent series The Dynasty on Apple Plus TV that focuses very, very closely on the New England Patriots of the 2000s and the following decade, Matthew Hamachek. Matthew, welcome to the program. It's great to talk to you. And the fact that we had some technical difficulties allowed us to talk a little bit before we got rolling. I probably enjoy that more than I'll enjoy the interview, although it's up to me to make sure that we both enjoy the interview. Good morning and hello.
Yeah, good morning and thanks for having me on. Somehow, a Packer fan and a Viking fan have found themselves sitting here talking about the New England Patriots.
Yeah, that's right. I've done some research on you, and I know that you're a Packers fan. So before we get into any of the Patriots stuff, I want to know, who do you blame for the fact that the Packers only made it to one Super Bowl during all the years they had access to Aaron Rodgers? You got to blame one person. Who do you blame?
One person. I'm on my feet. I'm trying to think of what the most diplomatic way to answer that question because I don't think I can tell you who the one person is. All I know is this. You look at what Brian Gutekunst has done with that team in 1 year to turn it around. I know that there's plenty of Bear fans that I am good friends with who are devastated by the fact that the rebuild year turned into a playoff run and getting all the way to the divisional round. So all I know is things are looking bright for the Packers right now.
Oh, absolutely. And that was very diplomatic and tactful
There
on
we go.
your
There we
part. But
go.
let's
There we go.
see. Let's see. Hey, it was one Super Bowl with Favre, one victory, one appearance with Rodgers. We'll see what they can do with Jordan Love. But already people thinking ahead to next year are starting to circle the Packers as a team that may get back. And if they're like, if last year wasn't an aberration, get used to the Packers still being a contender and a serious threat to get to the Super Bowl every year. All right, let's talk about the team that was a serious threat to get to the Super Bowl
Sounds
every
good.
year, it seems like, from 2001 through 2019, the New England Patriots. What was the moment, the light? We were talking before about what's next for you. What was the thing that made you say, this is what I need to do?
Well, I had been working on a doc series about Tiger Woods for HBO in 2019 into 2021, and that doc series had been inspired by a book that had been written by Jeff Benedict, and Jeff Benedict had written the book that is the inspiration for this, and he basically said, "Would you be interested in this?" And I wasn't a fan of the team, and really didn't know much about them. But I thought that the idea of a series about the New England Patriots, if it could be done in a way that really got into the characters, got into something beyond the X's and O's and the hoisting of Lombardi trophies, was what could make this thing interesting. And the other part of it was a chance to talk to the 70, players, the coaches, the front office folks, the league officials, and the rivals, and just saying, okay, as I started to do more research, what became clear is that there had been, like, Halberstam had written this incredible book called Education of a Coach in 04, 05 about the first part of the dynasty, about Belichick, and Tom had had his doc series. And there was always these like very, very specific lenses through which the story had been told in the past. But what if we get everybody together? They're all on the record. This is not the anonymous sources, articles that people have read. You can sit back and let these people tell their stories, and maybe we can get to the thing that people like me who didn't grow up Patriots fans are actually interested in, which is sort of the unvarnished telling of this story, where you get into things like Spygate and Deflategate and Hernandez and really talk about how something's created by people, and then also talk about how it comes to an end.
How different is the docuseries from the book?
Well, I think the biggest difference is basically the first 5 chapters of the book are really about Robert Kraft's backstory and his life, and we sort of condense all of that into a 2-minute pod in the third episode. So I think that's the biggest difference between the book and the series. And then beyond that, I think it's just having everybody on the record is very different than reading about something unfolding in the book, because you can look at a person's face and you can see how they are processing information. And there's sort of no better example of that than Tom and Bill in the series, right? You get to really look at them. And I think one of the things that people will see, especially in the back half of the series, is that Tom is vulnerable in a way that I don't think you've really ever seen him before, because I've now combed through, we had access to like 35,000 hours of archive, and I've seen almost all of his interviews that he's done, whether it was for the Patriots, whether it was with NFL Films. And I think we got him in a place where he was reflective, but also really willing to go back to what it was like to be in the room when all of this stuff was happening. And so, that's, to me, the best part about making a documentary, is that, you really get to talk to these people and let them tell their stories.
One of the reasons I jumped at the chance to do this, Matthew, is as my wife and I were watching the first episode the other night, she blurted out halfway through it, how did they get all these people to do this? So my question to you is crafted by my wife. How did you get all those people to do it?
It was, so it's interesting. The Tiger thing that I talked to you about was in a lot of ways the opposite, because I didn't have Tiger, I didn't have his inner circle, but the process of getting people to sit down and do interviews is basically the same thing, right? You go to them and you call people up and you say, hey, I'm making this thing, and I view my role as to get out of the way in a lot of ways and to let you tell your story. And then some people immediately say yes. And then some people basically take a lot of time and, in some cases, a year of talking things through and asking questions and trying to figure out what kind of a story you're telling. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that and if somebody says, well, how am I going to be portrayed? Well, what I always like to say is you're going to be somewhere between the puff piece version of the way you see yourself and the version of yourself that somebody that doesn't necessarily like you all that much sees you. And in the middle is often where the truth is of what a person is like. And so I talked to all these people, and eventually everybody decided that they were interested in sort of being part of this. And some people were immediate, and some people took a year and a half to convince.
In the aftermath of the finalization, and I assume that the folks who submitted to the interviews have either seen it or heard about it, what kind of feedback have you gotten, good or bad? And I'm more interested in bad. I mean, have you had anybody give you a hard time about how they ultimately believe they were portrayed in this?
Well, the first two episodes are out now. So, no, I think by and large, I think everybody feels like they got to tell their story, right? And so that's sort of what, I don't know, that's what I told them it would be like. And I think that when they've watched it, that's what they've sort of seen. And one of the people that took so long to get in the chair that I really wanted was Adam Vinatieri, because I think that he has two roles in this. One is that obviously he was involved in some of these incredible moments where, he kicks the game tying and game winning field goal in the snow game. I think some people would argue that that's the greatest kick in NFL history, but then also has obviously two more Super Bowl winning kicks in the episodes that are about to come up. And I think the thing for Adam was that I think he gets asked to do all this stuff all the time. And so he had two things. One was, is this actually going to be the unvarnished telling of the story? Are you really going to get into things like Spygate, Deflategate? Because for him, he was with the Patriots for a while, but then he went to the Colts. And so his perspective as the kicker for the Colts is very different than his perspective when he was with the Patriots. And then the other thing that was really important for him was, are you going to get Robert, Tom, and Bill? And is this going to be them plus all the other guys and have it really be the Patriots rather than Tom's story, Bill's story, or Robert's story? And so that kind of conversation happened with a lot of people and took time. But so far, everybody's, loves what they've seen.
It's an interesting point because he left for the Patriots after 2005. He was with the Colts through Spygate. He was with the Colts in Deflategate, which the Colts instigated. I don't want you to disclose spoilers. That's not my goal. And I had the opportunity to watch all the episodes in advance. I didn't want to do it because I can't be trusted with that information. But you got my interest now. Do we have Vinatieri chiming in on his perspective of the cheating allegations, whichever cheating allegations they might be?
Yes. The answer is yes. That was one of the things that I talked to Adam about before I came out to film with him in his house in Indianapolis. I just want you to know, like, that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, is talking about what it was like to be on the Colts. How did the team view the Patriots at the time? And we have to be able to get into that. And to Adam's credit, he was like, heck yeah, let's go for it. So yes, he gives the perspective that the Colts had at the AFC Championship game in the 2014-15 season. So yeah, and we go, and we have an entire episode about Deflategate. And I think the thing that's interesting about that moment is, and Jackie McMullen, great journalist, says this. She sort of says, did it happen? Maybe it did, probably it did, but what the heck is that going on right now? And what she means by that is, I remember finding this piece of archival footage from one of the national morning shows, and the main pundit or host of the show goes, so we lead our day today with the ongoing Deflategate scandal, and then talks about wherever they are in the court system at that point in time, and then he goes, and in other news, ISIS has beheaded a hostage, and it's like what's going on with ISIS has somehow become the secondary news in our country because we all got wrapped up in this story and obsessed over it. And one of the things that Michael Strahan said when I was interviewing him for this, because obviously he and the New York Giants are the two, the team that has provided the greatest challenge for the Patriots. We were talking about the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and there's a line in one of those movies where the character says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And the way that applies to the Patriots is fans like you and me who have our team that we root for, oftentimes our team sort of die a hero. They may get to one Super Bowl every 20 years, and that's it. And then nobody sees them back there again. But the Patriots kept winning and winning and winning. And when you do that enough, you become the evil empire. And then when things like Spygate happens, that's when, you go from just the person that people are sick of winning to embodying that, like I said, the moniker of the sort of the evil empire. And it's one thing to hear people talk about that, but one of the things that we had was access to all of this footage. I think I think one of our post supervisors put it together, and they found out that if you filled up two Mack trucks with tapes, that's how much archival footage we got for this. Wow. And we're in the locker room when Bill is addressing the team about the Spygate scandal, and then you're in the locker room when the team starts to win and go on that undefeated season. And an editor that was working on the project, who is an actual diehard Patriot fan, he sort of said it's like you're watching the evil empire on the Death Star going from planet to planet, destroying everybody in their path. But instead of it sort of being this somber thing, they're having a party while they're doing it, and Brewski's has like a music playing, and they're listening to Another One Bites the Dust as they beat the Cowboys and they beat the Colts and they sort of beat everybody that they could possibly run into until they get to the Super Bowl that year.
So I followed and covered Spygate very carefully, and we know what happened there. They went on the great run, as you said. Deflategate, same idea. They come back and win the Super Bowl, and Tom Brady unlocks a higher level of achievement with fully and properly inflated footballs. In between, though, and again, I haven't seen all these. I don't know if this is going to be part of it. Spygate 2, the scandal that broke on the Friday before Super Bowl 42. How much of that makes its way into the Dynasty? Because I know there are some people who believe, they won't say it because they don't want to be perceived as making excuses, and maybe they say it in this, that thing happening when it did and the way the league came down on them when they did just before Super Bowl 42 is one of the reasons why they lost that game to the Giants and didn't go 19-0.
You're referring to the accusations that they filmed the walkthrough of the Rams in 2001, which came out basically the night before they played the Giants in the 2007-2008 season. And the answer is yes, we go into
Yes.
that. And it
Ooh,
was a story
good.
that broke in the Boston Herald. And um, yes, the answer is yes, and it airs this Friday. And is a fascinating story because I think that it just added to the way that the country felt about the Patriots, right? It was enough that they had already been caught from Spygate against the Jets at the beginning of that season. But then, even though the accusations were ultimately proven to be false and the Boston Herald ran a retraction, it still made it feel like um, we were all collectively Giants fans at that in that Super Bowl in the country, and everybody was sort of rooting for the big bad Patriots to finally sort of meet their match. And so I think that again, the thing that I really love about these stories is how you can sort of occasionally turn a mirror back on the audience. And I think one of the things we really go into in both the Spygate and Deflategate stories is what it said about the rest of the country and how they viewed the Patriots and what they were hoping for um, in these big games. And so it's not only a story about the characters in the building, but it's also a story about sort of us and how we viewed this team over time.
I'll still hear quotes from time to time from guys like Marshall Faulk and Kurt Warner who still believe, despite the fact that the Herald retracted it and the league did nothing about it, they still believe to this day that something fishy happened in advance of Super Bowl 36. And I see that you have Mike Martz on your list of people that you interviewed, so can't wait to see episode 3 for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is what's said about what we've been calling over the years Spygate 2. I've got so many other questions I can ask you, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. What's the best thing that ended up on the cutting room floor?
Oh my gosh. We interviewed so many people that just didn't like I mean I got to talk to Rodney Harrison, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, and he has probably two sound bites in the whole series. That entire interview was just incredible, but it just didn't fit into the story that we were telling because once they get to Super Bowl 36 and win, I'll never forget. I was sitting there and I was talking to Scott Pioli, who was at the time the vice president of player personnel for the Patriots in this story, but now is obviously working in media. And he told me this great story about how after the third Super Bowl in 4 years, he's standing there and he starts to think about the idea of an addiction to winning and what it makes you do, what you have to give up, and how you're constantly trying to find a way to continue to win. And what it made me realize was that once they get to the top in Super Bowl 36, that the next two are very, very similar. And to spend the time to go and say, okay, well, they get to Super Bowl 36, they win that. Then in the 2002 season, they don't make the playoffs. And then the next year they cut Lawyer Malloy and they bring in Rodney and then they win again and then they win again the year after that. And I could have detailed all the AFC championship games and there's just incredible stuff there. But it's not that if you're doing it that way and this sort of very linear and then this happened and this happened, this happened, then you're just sort of like you're a collector of facts and that's not really storytelling. And so when Scott talked about that and talked about this idea of the addiction to winning and all of that, it felt like the right place to then pivot to the idea of Spygate. And because I think Spygate is part of that conversation about what you will do in order to win. And so we didn't spend as much time on those second two Super Bowls and go right into that 2007 season. And then the second that season's over and they lose to the Giants, that's when the next regular season game plays against the Kansas City Chiefs and has this horrific knee injury. And I think that really sets the tension for the rest of the series because Tom's out. He is facing his football mortality for the first time in his life. And he realizes it in that moment from what he tells us is that the show goes on without him. And one of the things that Belichick does so well and his sort of superpower is that he takes whatever he has and he makes the absolute most of it. That year it was Matt Castle. Um, and so while Tom's away, he says, how do I not break? How do I never get to the operating room table again? And sort of that's the beginning of this idea of I'm going to play till 45. And then at the same time, you have Bill Belichick, who has this sort of irrefutable proof that at a certain point, all quarterbacks fall off of a cliff. And so you have a guy who's like, I'm going to play till 45, and a guy who says, I need to find a replacement for you because it's a fact. I'm seeing it in front of me. And that's the beginning of the tension. And then all of these things that are sort of the foundation of this perfect machine of the Patriots of selflessness and team first and the Patriot way, which is a lot about sort of subjugating your ego. Some of that stuff that they kept at bay for 15 plus years starts to creep its way into Patriot Place. And that's sort of what the last three episodes are really about.
And Matthew, what's amazing is, as somebody who has covered the NFL every day for the last 23 years, so much of what's happened throughout that run of greatness the Patriots had helps inform the different things that happen now, whether it's something similar or something different. I'll give you two of them, and then I'll let you go, because I know you got more important things to do than listen to me prattle on all day. But first,
All right.
when Tom Brady suffered that knee injury against the Chiefs, Bernard Pollard comes in low, comes in hot, tears the ACL. Tom Brady disappeared. Tom Brady was gone. We never heard from Tom Brady again that year. Contrast that with Aaron Rodgers this past year. Week 1, he suffers the torn Achilles tendon. And we hear as much from Aaron Rodgers, if not more from Aaron Rodgers, throughout the entire year. I'm not making a judgment. I'm not saying what's right or wrong. It just really is as stark of a difference as you can imagine. And it made me think of Brady. Like, this guy keeps talking and talking and talking. Brady was just gone, and the game did move on without him. And it's almost like he understood that's how it worked. And maybe Rodgers' mindset is, I really don't want it to move on without me.
I think that that's one of the things that you'll notice about Tom throughout the entire series, which is that he really did buy into the culture that was created there. It was something that him and Bill did together with Robert. And, one of the things that the people talk about later is that part of that culture was that at the beginning of every season, they would sort of have it throughout the season, they'd have these low light sessions. And the first person that Bill would talk about a lot of the times was Tom. And Tom, I think, for a long time knew that by taking some of that and having it be said in front of other people, it created that feeling of, well, if a rookie's watching this and they're saying, I mean, Matthew Slater says it, he says that, but that's Tom Brady. And he's won at the point in time that Matthew Slater's talking about. Tom's a 4-time Super Bowl champion. And if he can say that about Tom, then he can say it about all of us. And that's the part of that selfless culture of not being out there. It's one of the things that Bill always talked about, and you see him saying it to them in the locker room, is nobody wants to hear from you guys. Keep your mouth shut and just, play the game. And like I said, the series is as much about the creation of this perfect machine and them sustaining it for a really long time until eventually there were starting to be cracks. And that's like what we start to watch and detail in those last 3 episodes.
We once had Terrence Porkchop Knighton on our morning show, and he told the story of how he was asked by a reporter during training camp about how one of his teammates was doing, and he praised the teammate. And Belichick destroyed him for it, because it's not your job to talk about anything but your job. And there was a moment in the second episode where I thought of that, because they asked Tom Brady after one of the games how he played, and he said, you need to talk to the coach about that. And it's that message of, you never say anything about anything. That's not your job. That's my job.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that I thought was really important in this is that as we're detailing the unraveling of this whole thing, you really have to make sure that you understand everybody's perspective. You may disagree with some of the decisions that the people made, but like, let's say you look at what Tom Brady did. There was sort of a point where after the Falcons Super Bowl, somebody talks about how Tom maybe was a little bit less team focused than he had been in the past and was starting to grow his business and things like that. I want to make sure that people can watch that episode and say, well, I don't necessarily agree with him, but I completely see why he did that. I understand what winning that Super Bowl and coming back from 28-3 does to a person who for their entire life has been willing to subjugate their ego and sort of make themselves equal to a rookie that's coming in. At the same time, I want people to be able to look at Bill and the decisions he made and say, there were things that Bill did that I might not agree with, but I completely understand. And I think the best stories are when you can watch the characters and say those things and sort of understand where they're coming from and why they're making the choices that they're doing, and sort of avoid the idea of building up a straw man just to sort of kick them over. And I hope that when people watch those later episodes, that's what they feel.
I got one more topic I want to address with you because I thought of this one when I was at the Super Bowl 11 days ago. Travis Kelce accosts Andy Reid on the sideline, yells at him, bumps into him. Reid just lets it go, doesn't bench him, doesn't punish him, doesn't do anything that would get in the way of the broader goal
I
of
think we're
winning a
going
Super
towards Malcolm
Bowl
Butler here.
with the assistance of Travis Kelce's. Exactly. Because apparently you finally got the answer to why what I believe Bill Belichick did, cut off his nose to spite his face, sent a message to Malcolm Butler at a time when maybe a play or two from Malcolm Butler is the difference in a game that ends up being a shootout.
I think that what you see in that episode is what's so great about the Patriot system, the Patriot way, is that, like I said, they've kept this thing at bay for a very long time. But I think there's a level of mental exhaustion that also comes into play because of how rigid the system is and the culture is and everything. When you win at the end of the year and you're hoisting the Lombardi Trophy over your head, all of it's worth it. But what happens when the players feel as if a decision has been made that may have cost them that, but they still had to go through a really, really tough year? And yes, we ask everybody basically, and you see me do this, what happened with Malcolm Butler, and one person gives an answer that I think gives you a much bigger clue as to what happened. But I think the important thing there is that you also see the team sort of unraveling a bit. And one of the journalists who was actually in the locker room with the Patriots afterwards, half jokingly, but half seriously says that it felt almost like there was a mutiny beginning to form after that Super Bowl was over. And so, there were so many different moments where I was sitting and asking these questions and my jaw was on the floor, and hearing the players talk about what it felt like in that locker room afterwards was certainly one of them.
Last one for you. I hate to say that because I have a bad habit of making that commitment, not honoring it, but I'm going to try. Last one.
Yeah.
Given what you learned over the period of time that you directed the Dynasty and all the interviews, everything you watched, everything you felt, everything you amassed, scale of 1 to 10, how surprised were you when, after this past season concluded, it ended between Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft?
Well, that's a great question. I think that when you watch the series, the answer is I was shocked. I think Bill's obviously the greatest coach of all time, if not one of, whatever category you want to put him in. But I think that when you watch the series, you'll see the breadcrumbs of the reasons why everything in the building is sort of the way that it is now. And you really get an insight in the 10th episode in a lot of ways to what was going through Robert Kraft's mind as he's sort of trying to deal with the fact that that Eagles Super Bowl really affected not only the team but really affected Tom. And I think there's this realization of, at some point in time, everybody's not going to be able to be together, and what can he do or not do as an owner to affect how that plays itself out. But the thing that was really remarkable to me in talking to him about that was he was deeply convinced that there was a way to make sure that they stayed together, even towards the end of everything. And that was always his desire because in his mind, it was pretty simple. I've got the greatest coach and the greatest player in the history of this game. I will do anything to make sure that they're together as long as humanly possible. And, he details how, in a lot of ways, he turned the thing over for most of those 20 years to Bill to make all of those football decisions. But in that last episode talks about how basically for the first time in 20 years, he stepped in and tried to make sure that they stayed together as much as possible. And having insight into that kind of the way he was thinking and the way he was trying to manage that situation is also fascinating.
It sounds like that Eagles Super Bowl loss really was pivotal, and it's not surprising. We had that game on NBC, Matthew, and I remember walking into US Bank Stadium for our rehearsals, and I looked up, and they had these huge banners of the quarterbacks, and you see Tom Brady, and you see Nick Foles. And my first thought was, what the hell are we doing here? Like, why are they even playing this game? Tom Brady versus Nick Foles, are you kidding me? Which made the outcome even more stunning, especially when, like I said, the feeling was you use Malcolm Butler, a play here, a play there, and the Patriots end up with more points than the Eagles in that game that ended up being a shootout. All right, this was excellent. I appreciate you giving me so much time. I appreciate the work you've done. This series has been great so far. I can't wait to see what's next, and I can't wait to see what's next from you. I think you really are gifted at what you do. You do a great job at telling stories based on real-life events, uncovering stones that we didn't even know had anything under them. And I know it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a huge commitment. And I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate some of your time. And again, we look forward to seeing the rest of the Dynasty.
And it takes a great team. I worked with 56 people on this thing that, all spent so much time away from their families and giving up so much. So kudos to them, too, for everything that they gave for this.
Well, appreciate that very much, and we hope to talk to you again down the road.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.